Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm gonna thank everybody for coming. We clearly are having some trouble with people still popping in. So if you are getting any kind of trouble with that, I'm gonna be monitoring the chat room and watching for that and sending invites as needed. We're gonna push this off to Jennifer to let her start. She is our Spokane-Eastern Washington Women's Council President. Thank you so much for being here, everybody.
Thank you, Christy. Welcome all our members, strategic partners, and guests. I am so excited to spend the morning with such amazing leadership as we learn more about diversity and inclusion and open some great conversations of learning. So we have a dynamite audience today, and I'd like to welcome some of our honored guests that are on our list. So Tracy Royale from Women's Council of Realtors, Illinois State President, welcome. Thanks for being here. And we have Eileen Goldroyd from Women's Council of Realtors. She's our National Liaison, Eastern Washington. And Wendy Bailey, Director and Chair of Diversity and Fair Housing at Pikes Peak Association of Realtors. Thank you guys so much for being here today. We appreciate your love and support. So at this time, I'd like to invite our WCR Platinum Strategic Partner, Kelly Bass with Country Financial, to lead us in our flag salute. Kelly, are you there?
Yep,
I'm here.
Awesome.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Awesome. So if everybody would please rise and let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which I stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kelly. We cannot have these events without our sponsors like you. So you are so loved and appreciated, and we would love to hear a little bit more about you and your services you provide us.
Well, hi, I'm Kelly Bass, and I own Country Financial by Bass Agency, and I do insurance side of everything. I do both auto home for your first-time home buyers and your seconds and refis. It's great, but I also do the life key portion of it to help your clients make sure that they get to keep their home if, God forbid, something were to happen to one of the
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kelly. We appreciate you. It is my great privilege to introduce you to our event host and MC today, Tom McArthur from the Spokane Association of Realtors. Welcome, Tom.
Delighted to be here. Thank you, Jennifer. It's an important conversation with what has been already mentioned as a world-class panel. So welcome one and all to our conversation here today. And to our panelists, thank you for the gift of your time and expertise as we explore fair housing, diversity, and inclusion. In my research behind our time together today, I always try to find something from the past that suggests the future. You know, Shakespeare said, past is prologue. And we know that the NAR was formed in 1908. And back then, it was the gentleman's club. No women were included in the conversation at that point. Even when the Spokane Association of Realtors was formed in 1911, the Spokane Spokesman Review referred to their luncheon at the Davenport as the real estate men were gathering together to associate themselves and start the Spokane Association of Realtors. After a couple of decades of knocking at the door with no one answering, you may know your own history here at the Women's Council, that in 1938, the Women's Council of Realtors were formed separately but equally to be part of the real estate discussion across our country. And I think it's with some irony and pride that the WCR can say that it is still leading the conversation about inclusion, as it has done now for, 83 years. So thank you for your history, and let's embrace our future together as we try to include the people of the rest of our country. Today, we will be hosting a panel with some distinguished guests from our industry. They all have a couple of things in common. All are realtors. The other thing they have in common hasn't always been easy. They are all share the status of being diverse. And we'll share today how that has affected their business and clients. We'll learn together how we can help to make sure we as realtors and our clients understand those who are different and how to make all feel more at ease. Our script has each of the panelists having 5 minutes to introduce themselves, so let's do that now. And in a overture to fairness, I've put them all in alphabetical order. Nate, that puts you first. Nate is president with Real Estate Solutions at Red Key Realty Leaders in St. Louis, Missouri. As was mentioned, as we got set up today, he was Zooming with the Seattle King County brokers yesterday on the subject of fair housing. So he's fresh off the virtual airplane to join us here this morning. Nate, we appreciate your attendance. Nate Johnson, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and your place in the conversation about fair housing, diversity, and inclusion?
Sure. Thanks, Tom. And thank you, WCR Spokane. It's an honor to be here. And you made me a little nervous, Tom. You said out of fairness, you're going to put me first for alphabetical order. Am I running for something? Is this an election? Did I miss something there? I hope that I didn't miss putting my name on the ballot or something like that. But I tell you, it's I've had the great honor of being a realtor and working in this industry now for 21 years. I tell people that my real estate license is now old enough to get drinks without a fake ID. So it's I'll tell you, I'm really, really pleased, like all of you, to have the opportunity to help people every day achieve the goal of home ownership. And, what I realize is that it hasn't always been that way. I think about my father and, myself, I didn't even know a realtor until I became an adult, virtually until I became a realtor. I never grew up in a home that we owned. As my father was coming of age, it was perfectly legal to deny housing opportunities to him. It wasn't shortly before I was born where it was perfectly legal to deny housing opportunities to women. And I was alive when, if you were in a wheelchair, it was perfectly legal to have housing opportunities denied to you. And certainly today, we still exist in a nation where it is federally legal to discriminate based on someone's sexual orientation or gender identity. And, for me, I'm really not an advocate for patience, but, I do realize that the wheels of justice do kind of move slowly sometimes. And we have made progress, and those of you that were in Seattle with me yesterday, I went over the history of fair housing, taking us back to 1866. And we have made a lot of progress since 1866 when the original Civil Rights Act was passed. However, there are some eerie similarities that are happening in our nation that go back to that time, and you could look at some of the news articles and some of the things that are being discussed, and that could very easily be something from the 1800s or the early 1900s, to be for sure. With the exception that today, we call us African American or Black, but then we would have been called Negroes. But you switch those words, and you would find a lot of similarities there. And I tell you, I think about my own association here in St. Louis. There was a time that I would not have been welcomed as a member of this association, and I been fortunate to have earned the right to serve as president in 2011 of the St. Louis Association of Realtors, and then later president of the Missouri Association of Realtors in 2018, first African-American president for both of those great organizations. And, do a lot of work with the National Association of Realtors as well, serving as a 2020 liaison for federal and public issues. This year, I'm honored to serve as chairman of the Sustainability Advisory Group. And all of these things have diversity implications to it. And when we look around what's happening in our nation today, we see how diversity and fair housing and equity really play a part in how we move forward. And it's up to us to really decide how we're going to move forward as a country, as a society. Because if we just sit back and allow someone else to sort of take the reins, then we may not land where we really want. We may not achieve the sort of highest ideal of our nation that I believe that we're here for. That's our goal. That's our job as realtors. And I know that, I may be sometimes putting a lot on our plate when I say that we as realtors are the keepers of the American dream. And it's up to us to really make sure that we are affecting positive change in our communities, I don't think it's too much, because we're leaders, you know, especially with WCR. You know, this is what we do. We're in this to make the world better, to make the communities that we live and work in better. And we only do that through advancing fair housing and social equity. We have to do that. That's our mission. That's our duty. That's what we're called to do. You know, and the National Association of Realtors has made some great strides over the last couple of years in achieving that outcome as well. In 2019, they hired Brian Green, who was a veteran from HUD, a 30-year veteran, to come on board to oversee, to head up the fair housing policy group. And we've got a fair housing policy committee now as a result of that as well. So that really helps to sort of put some teeth into legislation and really make sure that we're putting the fire under the folks that we've elected and the folks that they've appointed to make sure that fair housing is front and center in the decisions that they're making as it relates to legislation and policy. So I'm very proud to be a member of our association when we're doing things like that. Obviously, we've seen other things that our association has done historically that we've not been so proud of, but we've got to own that. And, you know, I say we've got to own that, because although I wasn't a member of our association when I would have been denied the opportunity to be a member of it, it's still my association. And it's still my duty to make sure that I'm doing whatever I can to help it become the best version of itself. So with that, I think that you know, I introduced myself. I do serve as a chairman of the Metropolitan St. Louis Equal Housing Opportunity Council, in addition to some of the other roles I share that I work in. I'm a commissioner for Bi-State Development Agency, which is our mass transit agency for the bus light rail system, the bus here in St. Louis. I serve on the board of directors for TrailNet, that works to make walking, biking, and active living a way of life in St. Louis. So like all of you, I'm involved in my community, and I work very hard to make sure that I'm doing my part and then some to create good opportunities for everyone. And then in addition to that, I am fortunate to travel all over the country these days via Zoom to talk with realtors and others about a variety of issues, whether it be fair housing, diversity, smart growth, ethics, professional development, business development, a variety of things. But like I said, my main role is here in St. Louis, helping people achieve the goal of home ownership. So again, thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to be with you, and I'm looking forward to a great discussion.
Terrific, Nate. Thank you. We're very glad that you're here with us. We'll come back to you in a couple of minutes here. Alphabetically next, Jerry Martin has been a broker since 1994. He's with the principal managing broker with RE/MAX Northwest in Bothell. When we were emailing this week, he wrote back saying, "Let's have some educational fun." Amen, brother. We're going to be with you on that for educational fun here today. And I should mention he's a former midshipman from the U.S. Naval Academy. Jerry, thank you for your service, and a former tavern owner in Redmond. So I'll drink to that. Jerry, you're next. Would you introduce yourself, please, sir?
I'll certainly drink as well. You know, and I feel so honored to have been invited to participate. I'm looking at our panelists, and you know, with Sam, and we're talking about as far as some of the things that are going on there. And Megan is like, "Oh my God, these are national speakers. I mean, these are big time folks," you know. And then I've had the opportunity and the joy of working with Nate as well. As a matter of fact, Nate and I were over in Paris, down in Cannes Festival area, working the United States Pavilion over at the MIPIM conference. And Nate and I also then served as president of our respective states during the same terms back in 2018. So again, my name is Jerry Martin, and as was mentioned, I am the principal designated broker for RE/MAX Northwest, which is the largest RE/MAX franchise in our state here. This is my 26 years of realtor in Washington, and as a company, RE/MAX Northwest is fully supportive of all matters addressing not just fair housing issues, but on any of the other DEI directives that we face each and every day. You know, Sam introduced me as, you know, the idea of addressing this as a diverse realtor. And I kind of chuckled at that because in my lifetime, I guess just by my mere presence, I would dictate that I was a a diverse naval officer. I had the privilege of being a diverse bank president. I was the first Black president of a non-minority owned bank in the state of California. What a privilege that was. I was a diverse business owner, as was mentioned. Now, Damon's Tavern was voted the #1 sports bar on the East Side, written up in newspapers and everything. And then, yes, I'm proud to be a diverse realtor, as well as a member of the Women's Council of Realtors. I'm a dues paying member, baby. Look out. You know, in my travels during the state presidency, went through many of the different areas here in Washington, and some, and if not most, believe that, quote, we don't have an issue in our area, so what's the problem, right? Well, perhaps that is true, or at least you may want to believe that to be so. But I would challenge you to think what it is like to be a diverse person to conduct business as we do in this profession. So for example, I'll share with some of the things that I as a diverse realtor face. So imagine talking on the phone to a client and having a good conversation, and yes, you know, I can help you, come on in, we'll sit down, we'll go through the MLS and we'll pull up some properties and we'll go take a look at them. So they come to the office just by telephone, not knowing who I am, get to the reception and ask to see Jerry Martin. And I get buzzed. I come out into the lobby and meet them. And they look to the receptionist and say, no, we're here to see the other Jerry Martin. Huh? It's like the other, no, this is, and I tell the receptionist, I got this. I got this. So we go into the conference room and, you know, I don't want them to be uncomfortable. I don't want to feel uncomfortable. I said, well, you know what? It's really nice meeting you. But you know what? my schedule is going to be very difficult. Let me get you another realtor to come out and help you. One of my buyer's agents to help you. And you can see the relief shed off of them perhaps, right? And I'm saying, man, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that person, because that would be uncomfortable for everybody. But that's one of the things. Imagine previewing properties in casual clothes, stepping into a neighborhood and seeing neighbors open their blinds, peeking out, coming out onto their porches and to their driveways just to make sure, and even asking something like, can I help you? Well, you can help me, all right? You can get out of my face, you know? You can just go back, but you don't say that, of course. But can I help you? And I said, no, thank you. I've got it under control. Appreciate your asking. Or imagine meeting, I don't know about you guys, but when I meet with clients at a property, I always arrive about 10 minutes early so that I can prep the house, make sure I turn on all the lights, make sure it doesn't have any pet odors or whatever. And I'm there in the house, and guess what? All of a sudden, here comes a cop car from one end of the street and a cop car coming from the other end of the street and stopping in front of the house. Not a comfortable feeling. And I've even been asked, you know, why am I there? And I've got to explain to them, I'm a realtor. Here's my card. Oh, okay. Or driving into a neighborhood and you pass the police car or security car cruising one way. And too many times, I see them do a quick U-turn and start following me and running my license plate. Imagine, I had one experience, this is fun. I had a couple coming up from California. They wanted to get out of the city. They wanted to get into a farming area, country area, out in the sticks. And so, you know, I said, okay, well, here's some properties they found, but I won't mention the neighborhood, so I won't embarrass anybody. And you drive into the neighborhood, and I'm listening in my headset, my own mind, I'm hearing da-da-dan, dan-dan, dan-dan, dan, da-da-dan, dan. And I'm going, oh man, this is not looking good. I'm going down this old dirt road in my car. I'm driving an expensive Mercedes, and I'm going up and down the road. And we show the property, and on the way out, my clients say, hey, Jerry, were those Confederate flags hanging out when we drove in? And sure enough, every other house had Confederate flags. They got the word out that there's a person of color driving a car in our neighborhood, and the clients must be Black or assuming such, and letting us know that, you know, This is where we belong. Even something as simple as this. I mean, please, realtors, listen to what I'm saying on this one. Don't leave key boxes in inconspicuous places, for crying out loud, like on the back door or attached to an outside faucet in the shrubs. You know why? Because when I go to show the property, I've got to go there, and immediately I'm suspicious looking, right? Just by virtue of being a person of color. And so, do I have regrets? Am I sorry? Not at all. I feel that I've been emboldened. I've gotten stronger by some of the things that I've had to experience. But just because you don't experience them doesn't mean they don't exist. Friends, they exist every day. And I ask you then, in this communication as we talk now, is to open up your minds, open up your hearts, open up your souls, and let's kind of be real about it. You know, Christy said, well, Jerry, you know, are there any questions you want me to ask, like softballs? And I said, no, let's just keep it real, you know? And if you feel uncomfortable as a person that's attending this, then, you know, shame on you. It's not an easy chapter to talk about. You know, if you haven't read it already, read the book, The Color of Law. It'll help you. It'll help us all. All right, I'll keep quiet now. Back to you, Sam.
Jerry, thank you for opening our eyes here this morning. You're very much appreciated in our conversation today. Megan Oswald is a broker with the Oswald Group with Fulton Grace in Chicago. She's on pause, COVID pause, from visiting every Major League Baseball and football stadium across the country. So we're grateful for the timing to have her able to attend with us this morning and talk about fair housing, diversity, and inclusion. Megan's been a broker for 15 years. Megan, you have the floor. Would you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your work in this area?
Thank you, Tom. Well, I don't have anything as detailed as I feel like, you know, Jerry did or Nate did. But what I will say is, it's really, I'm gonna be political. It's really messed up, right? I'm gonna that you have to say to put a lockbox in a not conspicuous space, right? Like in 2021, regardless, it's messed up that you have to say, watch where you put a lockbox, so that people aren't watching you or judging you when you are trying to get keys to go into a house, right? That in itself is ridiculous, but sorry. Anyways, good morning. It's morning for you guys. Good morning, everyone. I am Megan Oswald from Chicago. So happy to be here. Thank you, Christy, Jennifer, for having me. I am about 15 years into the business, and I have seen a lot. I did fall into this business, so it wasn't something that I sought out. And I would say I was in about 10 years as a realtor until I realized that I no longer wanted to be just a realtor, and I wanted to be a advocate for home ownership, right? And so I feel like that's when my mindset changed. That's when I started to become more involved, and that's when I started to really want to push for so many more things than just helping people buy a house, sell a house. There's so much more to this industry than just that, right? And so there's a plethora of things that I can go into. But the thing, like Jerry was saying, most people don't know what they don't know. If they don't experience it, they don't know they don't know that it exists. And so, you know, I'm here to be part of the conversation, to partake in today, and to tell you what I've experienced, but also to tell you what actions I'm taking to do my best and to do my part to change things moving forward. So I'm so thankful to be here. I'm honored that I was even asked, and to be part of this panel. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Megan, we're very glad you're here, and the honor is ours to have you visiting with us today. Thank you. Sam Powell is a broker with Pride Home Chicago and Dreamtime Realty. One of the quotes that I found used to describe her, she subscribes to the healing power of sarcasm and humor. Next year will be her 20th year in the business. Help me welcome Sam Powell. Sam, can you talk a little bit about your work in this field and your point of view on diversity and inclusion in fair housing?
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. Can you guys hear me okay? One of my biggest fears in technology is not being heard. So a little insecurity there. I may have been a speaker from time to time and the audio went out. So I always like to test. It's nice to have it go both ways. What I'd like to do is approach an introduction in this way. So I was born into a military family, a rather dysfunctional military family. Mother and father divorced when I was 2. Mother fought to get rights for us, but lost parental rights to us because she was a waitress, and dad had formal military income and housing and dental and medical and health benefits. So early on, I learned, as I get older, I learned sort of how that journey came to be, even in my own family's existence. Abused by a father. As part of my own route to escape, I put myself to college as far away as I could. So I go to Rochester Institute of Technology, which is a big university town. So what I mean by that is a beautiful melting pot of humanity. I was raised in Dover, Camden, Delaware, of all places, and in a family that was racist and homophobic and just not a good. They taught us a lot of lessons on what not to do and how not to treat people. So if you take away those nuggets, that's sort of how I came to exist in a meaningful way, by looking at those lessons and taking them into my future. So I go to college, amazing melting pot. I meet my life partner there. I meet her on day one, actually. We get together like 2 months later. Typical amazing lesbian story. We're still together 28 years later. She's overhearing everything right now, so it's so adorable. A little nervous, but it's cool. So it was in college that I, really started to just, I grew up in a family where my whole family life was a secret, and what happened behind closed doors was meant to be kept there. So when I met my life partner, I was just like, the only thing that's my one rule, my one non-negotiable is we can't hide. We can't pretend we're not together. We can't be in the closet, for lack of a better term. And she was all on board. So we fortunately aren't the people that have run into a lot of animosity or resistance or issues, at least not openly. So we've had a really great run in this. Now, other people we know have had their own varied experiences. When it was time for us to decide where we wanted to take our future, it was very easy for me. Like if we wanted to stay near my family, that was an easy no, or near her family, and her family's in Downers Grove. It's a western suburb here in Illinois outside of Chicago. So I was like, I want that. I want big city life. I want a place where the pool of humanity is a beautiful mix of a pool of humanity. So that's sort of how I started my journey in just wanting to be around other people. I learned also early on, even in my real estate career. So I become a realtor in 2002 and sort of fell into it also, ironically, Megan. But I had a buddy whose house we had been painting who said, you got to get into real estate with me. And I was just like, okay. So we get into real estate and I start working with him in the suburbs. Now imagine I look the same in 2002, very similar, maybe 1 or 2 less wrinkles. I don't age a lot, it would appear if you look at my photos. And so we're at $1 Million Property open house on a Sunday. Me and Bill's an awesome, he's a realtor still in the industry and a good buddy of mine. And they would approach him. He's also happens to be an out, comfortable gay man, but they would approach him in his business suit and say, why is she here? And he would share that with me later. And I'd be like, what the heck is that all about? I think it was Jerry or somebody who said, yeah, dress casually, comfortably, meeting with your clients. That's me to a T. Like, I just want to be comfortable in my own skin and then what I'm covering my skin with, right? How about be comfortable in all of those layers, starting at the very core? So I tried to focus on that in my career, ran into resistance and issues with that, decided to be a pantsuit kid for a hot minute, hated every second of it. And decided to just throw the pants out with the bathwater, and pants and heels are optional now in my life. The company that I choose to align with right now, Dreamtown Realty, incredibly inclusive. I interviewed with the owner, Yuval, in a baseball cap, shorts, and flip-flops with the conversation I led that if there's any issues here, let's talk about it. Because I want to be me. I want to be me 100% of the time. Can we get on board together? And he was just like, I knew what I was getting into. Welcome aboard. Come on, let's talk. Let's talk when we're going to sign you up. So going where you're celebrated, I think, is a huge win and an important piece of the puzzle for me. Early on in my career, I'm with my 4th real estate company, and in part by choice, and in part because of things that were happening in the industry that just weren't in alignment with my philosophies at the time. But I would annually at the Gay Pride Parade here in Chicago, had a relationship with a lubricant company that would send sex kits, protective sex kits. And I'm #1 in the marketing hall of shame for one of my previous companies that I worked for, because I had branded a sex kit with the company logo, and that was a no-no within the company. So also another question that I asked this owner is there anything that you would feel uncomfortable if I put your logo on? For example, sex kits, condoms, dildos, anything, like just threw out crazy words, of course, just to get his attention. And he was just like, nope, none of that offends me yet. Like, keep trying, kind of. And so I knew I was home. And so that's made all the difference in the world to me, is going where you're celebrated, being treated like a human being. How about that? Being included in conversations. Our company, Dreamtown, has a LGBT division where we market and advertise intentionally to that niche market, because we know it's a beautiful market to be a part of, and we want to be inclusive. And we just launched this year, and it escapes me the actual name, but it's a diversity group within the company now, where handpicked individuals, so that there is a conversation being had that is a mini nucleus that represents our company at whole. So I think the conversations that have been started over the past handful of years, again, that are so important, we're listening. And I think that that's kind of the key piece of the puzzle here. I personally, in showings, get confused as if I'm one of the buyers, especially if it's with two men. They assume I'm with one of the men, and then one of the other guys is the realtor. But I've also had this, and this is kind of the heartbreaking piece to me, is lesbian couple who is still in the closet, completely uncomfortable about going out and seeing properties and acknowledging that they're in a relationship together. So we would exclusively look at 2 bedrooms, knowing that they would be sharing one and have an office in the other. And the realtor would still ask questions like, well, who are the buyers? Because they didn't realize I was the realtor, even though I might even wear something branded or have handed them a card that kind of is the lead. I'm the realtor, talk to me. The question would still be asked, which you'd just be like, So interesting things like that would happen. Or a lesbian couple, gay couple looking at a 1-bedroom, and then we would get questions like, well, shouldn't you be looking at 2 bedrooms? And then you choose how you respond to that. And depending on my relationship with the client, might be something like, no, they're going to sleep together in that same bed. Don't you worry about it, or whatever it might be, just to diffuse it and then like move on, and then they're a little worried in the corner, like what kind of can of worms did they open up for themselves? But I think it's really just, how you open your arms and embrace the conversation. Sometimes it's really hard conversations to have. If you feel, I think Jerry said, if you feel some kind of way about even the topic today, that I'm sorry. I'm the other way. I'm like, you're very welcome. When I take the stage, sometimes for an audience, I will string some of our 26 letters of the alphabet together in ways that you may not like the way it hears. I'm not afraid of cuss words. They're letters strung together. How you react to them is on you. And so I say you're welcome, because if you're having some kind of emotional reaction to the conversations that are happening, then it's an opportunity for some self-work for you if you're interested in going there. If you're interested in going deep and trying to figure out what it was about, what triggered you. What was it about what was said that triggered you? And there's an opportunity on both sides for some growth in that moment, if both parties choose to have it, but at least each side can have it in their own way if they choose to. So I think keeping the conversation in the forefront, our Black Lives Matter, diversity, how important it is, the history, that it's so clear, the writing is on the wall about how effed up it has been and continues to be. And that unless we continue to make course corrections in very meaningful, deliberate ways, we're going to be stuck in this zone and have pockets of success, but not true success across the country, across the globe. So it's a true pleasure and honor to be here with you. Honored to be a part of Women's Council, and many of us on the screen here, we thank you for being a part of that with us and welcoming this really open and honest dialogue. Back to you, Tom.
Sam, thank you. I like your line, go where you're celebrated. That's a keeper for the day, isn't it? Let's talk about racial restrictive covenants. Sam just referenced about how effed up it's been, and maybe that's the phrase to describe where we're headed with the conversation next. This is a title document in the state of Washington. And in here is this language. This property shall not be resold, leased, rented, or occupied except to or by persons of the Aryan race. How does that make you feel? Are you included? Are you excluded? Racial deed restrictions became common after 1926, when the US Supreme Court validated their use. When the US Supreme Court validated their use. The restrictions were an enforceable contract, and an owner who violated them risked forfeiting the property. Many neighborhoods prohibited the sale or rental of property to Asian Americans and Jews as well as Blacks. In 1948, the court changed its mind. In 1948, declaring that racial restrictions would no longer be enforced, but the decision did nothing to alter other structures of segregation. It remained perfectly legal for realtors and property owners to discriminate on the basis of race. In 1968, Congress passed the Housing Rights Act, finally outlawing discrimination on the basis of race or ethnicity in the sale or rental of housing. So that was in place for 42 years. Any guess how many neighborhoods in Spokane still have racial covenants today? More than 40 neighborhoods. And there are dozens of houses, of course, in each one. So that's the reality. How bad does it get? I looked at some paperwork from the University of Washington, and they went through and they pulled these important sentences out from across the state. So here are just a few. The lot, nor any part thereof, shall not be sold to any person, either of whole or part blood of the Mongolian, Malay, or Ethiopian races. No person of any race other than the white race shall use or occupy any building or any lot, except as the covenant shall not prevent occupancy by domestic servants of a different race domiciled with an owner or tenant. So you could work there, you couldn't live there. No part of said property hereby conveyed shall ever be used or occupied by any Hebrew, a Jew, or by any person of Ethiopian, Malay, or Asiatic race. These are in the state of Washington, on the paper right now. Tracts or parcels of land in this plat shall be used for occupied only by members of the white or Caucasian race, excluding Semites, and no other person shall be permitted to use or occupy any tracts or parcels except employees may occupy the premises where their employer resides. Said lots or structures shall not be rented, leased, occupied to persons other than those of white race except domestic servants. And that's just a handful that I highlighted and picked out. Again, I ask you, how does that make you feel to know that when many of these documents were written, it was the hand of a realtor that held the pen? That's not us necessarily, it's our history, but is it us? So Jerry, you were testifying in Olympia just the other day. Olympia is our state capital for those who are from outside of the area. How do we deal with that? What do we do about that?
Thanks for asking. And I was asked to testify on House Bill number 1335. And as we've already talked about and established, I've been very involved as a realtor in the association for many, many years. And during that time, I've served as the local past president, past state president, and served on numerous state and local NAR committees. And now as past president for Washington Realtors, I've been diligently working on moving Washington Realtors forward on DEI issues. This being one of them. This is one of the bills that we addressed. And so Washington Realtors is making it a priority. And this specific bill is just one example of the work that we're doing around these issues. In fact, Brian Green's name came up a little earlier, and as we stated, he's the National Association of Realtors Vice President of Advocacy, who ran the Fair Housing program at HUD. And he's called Washington Realtors, and I quote, a leader on DEI issues, and he's relied on us as a state association as a partner in the development and presentation of innovative fair housing training solutions. And so this specific issue, a lot of the political people weren't even aware they existed, because the reality is that they're not enforceable. But just to know that it's still there turns your stomach. And those that I addressed in a Zoom meeting, they were sitting there and you could see in their eyes, they were like, what? You know, and when I spoke about some of the things that they were involved with this, there was this one congressional person, you could see tears welling up in their eyes. And so this specific issue is important to Washington Realtors, but it's also important to me, see, because as a child growing up in the early 50s and 60s, before the Fair Housing Act of 1968 being enacted, my family and I personally experienced the egregious results that were the intended purposes of these biases that were based on fear, hatred, and prejudices that were promoted by such deed and CC&R restrictions. I remember the first house my parents wanted to buy, you know, and those that you may have heard this when I was traveling around the state, because that was something we talked about even back then. But when we were living in an apartment complex and we were going to buy our first house, and I was so excited. I'm thinking like the Leave It to Beaver or the My Three Sons, or, you know, some of these nice houses with the little fence and the nice yard and this tree swing. And when my parents drove by through those neighborhoods to the neighborhood we eventually got into, it wasn't until years later, I thought it was just because my parents couldn't afford those nice houses. But in reality, yeah, they could have afforded it, but they were told specifically by the realtor that they got threats that if they bought in that neighborhood, the house would be burned to the ground. And so as a kid, I mean, my parents were smart enough and loving enough not to subject me to that thought. But the reality is that that's what that purposes was. And they made sure that if you did move in there, they were going to let you know you're not welcome. The Klan used to burn crosses on the streets and on the houses in the neighborhoods. Put up little hanging nooses in the neighborhood just to let you know. So now, the feedback that we got, by the way, was well received. There's a couple of congressional people that said, well, there's some historic value in that, and should we really be responsible to take out the history? I said, well, do you want to go ahead and maybe get some swastikas? That's historic value. How about some of the Confederacy flags and some of the things that, you know, promoted hatred and were known to promote those things? So the biggest hangup, I'm sure that the House bill is going to pass. The biggest thing was who's going to pay for it, who's going to be responsible to clear it. And so those are things that the legislative and the government affairs directors are working on. But I'm confident it's going to pass, and that's just a step in the right direction. But I do have to share with you guys, you know, and it's not political because I'm a realtor. I'm not a Democrat, a Republican. I'm not independent. I'm a realtor. But I have to say that this is my 70th year here on earth. And just recently, this is probably the first time in my lifetime, and I've been an optimistic all my life, but more recent than ever before, I'm concerned about our society. It's, you would think, getting better, but recently it's gotten to the point where I'm very concerned. I have two granddaughters, a 15-year, soon to be 15, excuse me, she's in her mind 20, but soon to be 15-year-old and a soon to be 13-year-old granddaughter. And I'm afraid for them because they're mixed. They are a mixed blood. And in the real world, that means they're Black. And they've got to grow up in a society that I thought was getting better, but in reality, it's starting to get a little sour again, and it's not going to be fun. But we're in this together, guys, and we have to fight for what's right. And so let me just say from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you so, I'm getting choked up, shit. I want to thank you for being here in the meeting today. It's so much. Damn it. Sorry.
Love you, Jerry. Thank you for speaking from the heart. I'll ask our other panelists to comment on this issue too. There was a question in the chat box about why these words are still in these documents, and that's because, at least in Spokane County, our county auditor has said that she doesn't have the legal power to remove those words, that in fact the law has to be changed to the state legislature, and that's the work that Jerry is involved with to help make that happen. So that's why they're still in the documents. They're considered historical and therefore cannot be altered without a law. And so that's what we're working on. Jerry, thank you. Nate, you're engaged in these conversations across the country. From that perspective, what can you share with us today about racial covenants and how they're being used, misused, and still on the books across the United States?
Yeah, sure, Tom. And Jerry, thanks so much for those comments. Very powerful words there. You know, you mentioned, Tom, 1948, the Supreme Court ruled that the restrictive covenants were not enforceable. So there's a very clear, something distinct that we need to recognize. What the Supreme Court said in the case Shelley versus Kramer is that judicial and state action would not enforce the restrictive covenants. However, they could be voluntarily enforced. And in fact, they were voluntarily enforced for many, many decades after that. You know, I think about my own neighborhood now. My wife and my kids, I've got two girls, 13 and 11. And we bought a quarantine house. You know, we just moved a couple of months ago in November, just before Thanksgiving. And, you know, I think that a lot of this, we moved into a private street in the area. And one of the things that happened was I was at the office and my wife was there and with my girls, and she was greeted by police officers when she was at the house moving in boxes. And the police officers asked her what she was doing there, basically. And she said, well, we just bought this house. And, you know, they asked a few other questions of her. What's your name? What's your date of birth? You know, those types of things. And for me, you know, it's not quite the type of welcome that we would have expected in the neighborhood and in the area that we were moving to, because it was clear to us that somebody had to call them, you know, because we didn't look like everybody else that was on that street. And it's unfortunate that that's the type of welcoming that so many people have in neighborhoods all throughout our country. It's unfortunate, and I think that the restrictive covenants that exist are kind of speak to that, because as it was stated, they're still on the books in many places. In fact, when we got a copy of our indentures, our neighborhood indentures, it wasn't until 2020 that early in 2020. So earlier in the year that we moved in, they decided to remove the language that said, no person of Negro blood, unless you're a domestic servant, can live on these premises in this neighborhood. 2020, it was there until then. Obviously, it's not enforceable because in 1968, the Supreme Court Fair Housing Act made those restrictive covenants legally unenforceable. It wasn't 1948, it was 1968 that was actually, that became the legal, they became legally unenforceable. But still, even in that time, you still saw government action, lending policy that would perpetuate the segregation of neighborhoods all over the country. And that's kind of where we exist today, because the policies that were created and certainly codified and endorsed by us as realtors result in the segregation that we see today. And that is a result of a lot of these restrictive covenants that we see, because they were put on the books, and in many cases they were enforced and they weren't taken off. And, that sort of speaks into, that sort of, sort of dovetails us right into the steering component of that too. Because even though the restrictive covenants became non-enforceable, they were still overtly enforced. Okay, covertly enforced. They weren't overt because they were not enforceable, but they were covertly enforced. You would see realtors and others making it clear that these folks aren't welcome in the neighborhood, and that's unfortunate. And that's why we have to do so much as realtors in 2021 to correct the wrong that was done of realtors and others in our society over the last 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years that we've been dealing with housing in America. And I say, looking back the last 10, 20 years, it happens today. It happens today. And this is what we have to be clear. And if there's any point that I can make clear today for us, is that this is still happening. Fair housing is not something that was solved. The Fair Housing Act of 1968 didn't solve it. None of the legislation that has solved it since. It's still an ongoing issue that plagues our communities all over the country. And we have to work to educate ourselves to make sure that we're prepared to fight the good fight to achieve equality and social equity in our neighborhoods. That's what we're here for. And then we need to take that challenge seriously.
Nate, thank you. I appreciate your perspective as well. Megan, let's include you back in the conversation here too. What have you seen in your own life, perhaps also dealing with your clients there in Chicago, with reference to racial covenants and documents that make us uncomfortable even today?
Well, here's the thing, Tom, is that while Chicago, we don't have those type of covenants, we are still probably, Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the, either the number one or number two most segregated as far as our neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods are definitely completely segregated, right? Across the entire city. And so what I've experienced, I'm born here, raised here, I love Chicago. What I've experienced is that if I have a buyer that is buying in an area where they're not that many, I'm trying to be politically correct here, right? Where there's not that many of those, that ethnicity in that area. I've had sellers open for us and say, you can't come in. Like, no, we're not gonna allow you in. And I'm like, well, why? And so I've experienced that, not with me necessarily, but with my clients, because their ethnicity is not common in that neighborhood, right? And so while those covenants are here in Chicago, our neighborhoods are still very segregated, right? And so that's part of our history. So I'm watching all these comments, I'm looking at all these things, like how can we change those things in actually pen and paper? It's not about just changing those things in pen and paper, right? Because that's not the solution. That is not gonna take care of anything. Well, yes, that's a help and that's a start and everything like that. That is not the solution. And so I'm not saying I have the solution, but what I'm saying is that these things still exist. And so we as realtors, as homeowners, as advocates for homeowners, we have to push. Like I think I was telling you the other day, Tom, is that, I had a buyer, we put an offer on the house. The seller said, no reason, except that quite honestly, they were not the buyer that they wanted to live in their 20-year home where they raised their kids, right? That wasn't who they wanted to sell the house to, right? They didn't come out and say that, but I talked to the agent. I knew what was going on. I could tell. Above asking, no other offers on the table, conventional loan, 25% down. What's happening? Where's the problem here? You don't want to take their offer, right? In a predominantly white neighborhood, and my buyers are people of color, right? And so that was a teaching moment for me, right? So I was representing the buyer. There was very little that I could do, or I'm sorry, I was representing something. There was very little I could do, but I had to let those sellers know, you have to allow these people into your home. You cannot discriminate based on, I had to go through everything with them, right? So while my class, I'm not protected. I'm a lesbian as well. I'm not protected in every state, right? Just like Sam was talking about earlier. My class is not protected across this country, right? In Chicago it is, in Illinois it is. But I had to go through the list with them and let them know that you cannot discriminate based on these folks' race. They didn't care. To them, that was their house. That was where they raised their kids. They didn't want those people in their house. This, like, do you hear what I'm saying? Like, in how, like, there's only so much you can say without slapping somebody or punching someone in the face, right? To really get through to them. And so it was a teaching moment, mind you. We ended up figuring it out and going through with the sale, and it took a while, but it was definitely a teaching moment, not just for me as a realtor to the client, but also as for me as a realtor to the other realtor, right? So we have to also remember, we're not just teaching the people that live in these communities. There's a lot of realtors out there who aren't on the same page as us. We're on this call for a reason. All of us on this call, on this Zoom meeting, are here because we feel the same way, right? Or are open to the idea of trying to understand why this exists and trying to change it. There's many of us who are not on that same page. So we as realtors need to take it on ourselves to really teach our peers. And that, I feel like that's a big component of where we need to begin, because you have no idea how much racism exists within this realtor community. You have no idea. Racism, homophobia, I mean, the list goes on, right? I've seen it, I've experienced it, and it has to start within. It really, really does. Sorry, I was rambling.
I'm glad for that. Megan, so how, it seems like realtors have a unique position here, that we are coming from the outside into someone's home, that we are bringing a attitude, a conversation with us as we meet these people. How do we start those conversations on the right step, if you will, where we can add our realtor influence in the right direction, that we can guide maybe thoughts and actions in the proper place?
Well, here's the thing. As realtors, you have to stand your ground. You have to really work on the code of ethics. If you don't believe in that code of ethics, you shouldn't be in this business, right? Number one. So if you get a listing and you get a client and they say, well, you know, I don't really want to sell to these people, move. Keep moving on. Like, do not take them as clients, but everyone needs to be on the same page as that. You know, it can't be like, well, I'll get another realtor. Like, us as realtors have to really follow that code of ethics. And you have to explain to that seller, you cannot do that, right? You cannot pick and choose who you want to sell to based on their, you know, sexual orientation, based on their race, based on their disability, whatever it is. You can't do that. And it really does. You know, us as realtors, I'm sorry, sometimes I was there and early in my career, I just wanted the listing. You just want that listing, you just do it, you take it, you know, okay, yeah, it's fine, right? But the more involved I got, the more I really understood, we can't do that. You can't just, you know, bypass what that homeowner is saying about racism. You can't just take the listing and take the listing. You have to stand your ground. You have to tell them, like, this is not ethical. But every realtor has to do that, because if one realtor says no, they're going to move right on to the next realtor, right? So we all have to work together. That's where it starts. It starts within us. I think it's a domino effect.
So to put a visual on it, which is my way of thinking, if you're going to wear the realtor coat, that means something is a certain way on the inside.
You know, our code of ethics is there for a reason. But I'll be honest with you, and it's sad to say, there's a lot of realtors, there's a lot of folks out there that don't hold our code of ethics. They don't follow them, you know? And that's why we get a bad rap, or that's why we get a bad name. But honestly, I don't care about the label. I don't care about the bad name. I mean, I care about the people that it's affecting, right? And so that code of ethics is put in place for a reason. Unfortunately, there's people out there that are just in this industry to make money. And I get it. Everyone wants to make money. You have to live, you have to feed your kid. My kid eats a lot, right? But like, there's a reason that that's in place. And what ends up happening is that when people don't follow that, that's when this starts to spiral into a domino effect of where these, I guess, not rules, but where we're giving into these clients and just doing it to get a listing, to make the money, right? And we're just following whatever they want. And again, I'm not going to sit here and preach to the Christ. I've never done it. Almost 16 years in the business, and yeah, my year 1 or 2, I took a listing. Whatever you say, you don't want so and so to live in your building. Okay, whatever. I need some money. I'm going to take it. Yes, I did that. Right? I am not going to lie. But I've grown, I've learned, I've matured. And again, I'm not a realtor anymore. I'm an advocate for home ownership, right? And so like, I feel like that's a completely different hat that I wear. And so I'm not just here to help someone buy or sell a house, right? And so I truly believe that we need to educate not just each other as realtors, but we need, obviously the homeowners, but we also, as a realtor to a realtor working on another transaction, needs to talk to that realtor, needs to talk to the other person, and have a true conversation with them. We're in this deal together. There should be the same goal in hand. And if it's just about the money, you're in the wrong business. Sorry. That's how I feel.
Thank you for that. And maybe to the younger brokers in our audience today, if you wanted to know what a realtor is, look to Jerry, look to Megan, look to Nate, look to Sam. That's what a realtor is. Speaking of Sam, what's your experience dealing with not necessarily racial covenants, although that too, Sam, but when you come in with a new client or you come into a property that you're showing to a client, is there a certain feeling that you get when the conversation is going to go that way?
Yeah. So from 2008 to 2013, I worked with buyers and sellers. So 50% of our business has almost always been pretty split. In 2013, I got a buyer's agent, and so haven't taken buyers out since then. But as a realtor, we come across all kinds of, and they're not unique situations, but we come across those kinds of situations. I don't have a lot of real clear examples. Some near misses where it's clear the conversation wants to go there. And it's our job to either get our clients into another room to avoid the potential confrontation, as it were. But I think it's even with the paperwork, right? So you're at a closing and the language in the docs, it's one doc at a time that's got to be cleaned up and corrected. There's no magic wand that's going to strip all of that language out of all of those docs behind the scenes. We recognize that. So we're going to see this language and these words into the very foreseeable future. When I'm 70, as Jerry is, I hope to look as amazing. And I will still have some of these super shitty stories and experiences because of the humanity that surrounds us, that populates our country and our nation and our world. We can't fix other people. We can't change them. But I also refuse to accept them as they are, right? If you're going to have such hatred, I prefer to avoid it, but it's impossible to avoid it. How do we have Nate's story where his wife is stopped at their brand new house in 2021 about moving into a community in a home that they bought for their family during a pandemic? So when there could be empathy, acceptance, there's even none of that happening. So it's heartbreaking to be a part of this. This is one of the reasons right here why I always told we call each other wives, but we're not married. And we're not married because when we got together in 1992, it was completely unaccepted across the country, and then legally in certain parts, and then stripped away, and then legally again, and then civil unions. And for the past 4 years, we had concerns about all of that being stripped away again. So we always decided if we need a piece of paper, then there's something else going on in our relationship. So in real estate, selling to, gays and lesbians and even straight couples who are in partnerships together, domestic partnerships together, we had to set up other protections for them. So that became our answer is, listen, the realtor doesn't come with this house. The sellers are not going to be here when you move in. So putting them and their biases and their ignorance and their hatred aside, do you want this house? Spend some time in this community. Are you going to feel comfortable in this community? And if you're a pioneer and you're interested in taking on a challenge, like clearly Nate's family is, but unknowingly to them, you may run into some challenges. Is that something that you're willing to take on? Are you willing to raise your children, your girls, in this environment? Are you comfortable here? I think that's where the conversations need to go and be, and is also sadly why we still have this kind of segregation happening not only in our fine city, but across the globe. People want to go where they're celebrated, right? I want to live in a community where I am accepted and embraced and can walk around the street holding my not wife's hand. There was another layer to this that I wanted to add, and you know how your brain is like, don't forget to say this, so you're not listening to yourself. So when it comes back, I'll tell you. It was about protections. So me and my wife, not wife, have power of attorneys with each other. We have living wills. We have trust. We have DNRs. So just say goodbye to me if I go under, it's okay. I'll still love you from above. I think that's where I'm going. It's putting it's education. It's putting the protections in place for where we are right here and right now, and then hoping that through the course and course correction of our nation, that we can continue to open up the eyes and hearts of those that are really struggling with their own internal insecurities. Because at the end of the day, I feel like that's one of the big pieces of the puzzle here is I love everyone in front of us. My word of the year every year is forgiveness. I forgive myself. If I was a bag of dicks, I'm sorry, Jerry. I will apologize and I will forgive myself in the morning. And if you're still mad at that Sam from yesterday, well, I've evolved. I'm a different person. So maybe join me in my new evolved space and let's have a conversation. But I think it's often one-on-one with consumers turned clients. Even in Megan's fine example of a seller having some resistance about who they want to sell to, whether it's truly their personal bias or a collective community bias that they feel and are inserting into the conversation, I think it's upon all of us to put our big boy, girl, brave pants on and have that heart-to-heart with the seller and explain to them why this is illegal and inappropriate, and will also very narrow their buying pool and ability for us to capture the highest and best financial return on their investment if that's what they're interested in, and remind them that they're no longer going to be living there, meaning they themselves. And so why is it important to them to dictate who should sleep in those bedrooms that they raised them in? So I think it's a one-on-one conversation constantly, peer-to-peer, realtor to customer. I love Megan's language, homeowner advocacy. I think I might, borrow that language because I think it's a great way to really change our mindset about what our responsibilities are here. But I think it's not going to go away if these past even just couple of years have made anything very clear. It's that it's always been there and now it's been awakened in some very traumatic ways across our country. And, Jerry bringing us all to tears with his emotion is what a lot of us have been feeling about what we're seeing just on our news broadcast these days. So it's happening in every walk of life around our planet. How do we walk into it face first? So if I were taking a buyer out today, I think I'd be much more brazen than maybe in the past. I think now we have some more tools and language that we can use as professional realtors who are a part of our national association, that we can have an outward conversation with the peer and be like, you do recognize this isn't appropriate, do you not? You do recognize this goes against everything we stand for as a national realtor, do you not? I think that there's ways to now use this language and protections that are being built for us by some of the best minds in our industry to take advantage of that and use that as sort of our arsenal to curb some of what some of us might be running into day to day. On the listing side, because I am me 1,000% of the time, I assure you, Jerry, I am a man constantly. I get thanked even at Airbnbs. I just stayed in an Airbnb in Florida, and I was thanked by the guy in an outward, not referral, but feedback recommendation that he can come and stay at his place anytime he wants. And I'm like, oh, okay. And even Facebook, when you play those silly little games that say, you know, what's the word that represents you? Just today, it said he is stubborn. And it's through Facebook, so I just don't understand, because I clearly noted I was a female and quite happy in the body that I happen to be gifted with. But anyway, I digress off of the topic at hand. But it's everywhere, and I think that it really is up to us to have the courage, because that's what it takes, to have the courage, even if it's not in the heat of the moment in that listing presentation with that consumer. Find the courage. Write the email, make the call, maybe make a video, send them the video, educate them, and then you decide if it's a battle that you're willing to take, because sometimes you can turn them into better human beings through education and experience and storytelling. And sometimes you cannot. And just remind them, I think, in closing, that no realtor who follows the code of ethics would take your listing if these are your terms of who is permitted to submit an offer on behalf to purchase your home. And I think at the end of the day, that's my message, is use the power of the language that we're being gifted and stand your ground when it comes to fair housing and human rights, and, you know, just doing the right thing for the people that you work for and with.
Agreed. Can I ask a question?
Megan, sure, please.
I'm gonna ask it to all of our 40 participants, actually. And I would like some honest answers in the chat if possible. Who here would hesitate to tell their client that they are, Sam, how should I put this? Who here, basically to tell their client that they can't do something, right? Like that they are, what's the word I'm looking for? Who here is nervous to tell their client that they're being, in Sam's word, a dick, right?
Bag of dicks. You got to have the whole bag.
So,
yeah.
You know, like, who's here afraid? Like, I want an honest answer. Nervous to tell their client if their client says, I don't know about that. A landlord, right? You have a landlord and they're renting their unit out or whatnot. I don't know. Who here is nervous to be honest? I want honesty here, right? That's what this is about. Who here would be nervous to tell their client that they're in the wrong? Put it in the chat.
While they're answering in the chat, let me share just a mini story. I had a white Caucasian client who wanted to look at properties, some new listings that hit the market on the west side of Chicago, primarily an African-American community. And she didn't care. She's an amazing human being. She's like, bring it on. I want to be in a community where I want to be in, and those are my people too. So we're out, you know, this is back in the day of paper for Sam, becomes important in the story, so bear with me. So I'm in my yellow Volkswagen Beetle, because that was my dream car at the time, bucket list accomplished. We're driving through said communities, seeing house 1, 2, 3. We get pulled over by police officers, and, you know, I'm just like, whatever, it's cool. You know, it happens to me from time to time, usually for some kind of traffic violation, which I know I hadn't done at this time. So we pull over, and of course, I'm like hands on the wheel, just because I know from what my peers go through, lessons from Jerry and his community, and Nate and your community. And I have no idea who's going to approach my car. So I'm all like, yep, let me be respectful, do what I need to do, roll the window down all the way. Temperatures were permittable, so I didn't have fear there personally. A female officer comes up on my side, a male officer comes up on my client's side of the window and is just like, what are you guys doing here? And my client, who's a good buddy and crazy, says, well, we're not buying drugs. And I was just like, thanks a lot. And here we go, strip search, car's gonna be stripped. And on the dashboard, and Volkswagen Beetle's dashboard, I always tease, is like a dining room table, it's huge. So on the dashboard is a set of paperwork for me and Rochelle, and now I slipped her name out. Rochelle has the same set of her paperwork over there. And so it shows, here are the properties that we're going to see. Here's our access instructions. So I could show the officer, yeah, we're legitimately house shopping. And they simply said, not to me. They turn to Rochelle and they say, you don't want to buy in this community. That's how it went down. The officers patrolling the community said, white girl, stop looking in this area. You don't want to live here. It's not going to be safe for you. In which Rochelle and I had a conversation after, and she's just like, F those officers. I'm going to live where I want to live. Nobody is going to tell me where I can and cannot live. I'll choose to take on the battles that I want to take on. And I've loved her for that ever since, as you can only imagine. But that's sort of the most striking experience that I can sort of relate to and share. And I'm kind of like glad I had the paper to be readily accessible. Otherwise, it would have been an iPad to be like, here's the places we're seeing. So it wouldn't have mattered necessarily, but I love that they were right there, ever present. We're shopping for properties, not buying drugs.
Well, and that's the thing, right? It was like the assumption, right? So same thing, people look at me. So obviously I look white, I'm mixed, right? I'm biracial, right? My mom's Puerto Rican, but I actually have lived in mostly predominantly areas of people of color, right? But you see me, and I've actually, same thing, got stopped by the cops. What are you doing over here? Buying drugs? No, I live over here, you know? And so it's one of those things, like, it's profiling. We're not talking about that. I'm going on a whole nother topic. Never mind. Okay, back to the chat. We're taking over this conversation. Okay, back to the chat. Because I'm really honest, because I know that this is a difficult conversation to have with your clients, right? Especially for newer agents. And that's why I asked. And I'm not trying to take over, but I want people to be honest. And it's okay if you're nervous to have these conversations with your client. That's what we're here for. That's what we're here to encourage you, that you don't even have, okay, this is going to sound bad, but you don't even have to put it on you. You should put it on you, because you should be the one advocating for equality, right? But if you feel uncomfortable doing that, which is you shouldn't, put it on the code of ethics, right? Like, you need to be able to relay a message to your client that this is what you stand for. So I've been looking at the comments in the chat, and I'm thankful that everyone's being honest. And it's okay. Like I said, I was at the same time. You need money. Just do whatever your client wants. Just do whatever they say. But again, we are realtors. We stand for a cause. We stand for a reason. There's code of ethics. And if anyone ever needs some advice or just some words to like talk through with their clients, please, I will put my number in the chat. You can reach out to me. It took me a while, but I am here, you know, advocating for everyone. And so, like I said, it's not easy, but we have to do it. And you have to be able to tell the other realtor next to you to do it, right? It's not going to be with the clients. It's really going to be with the realtors. I believe that.
And maybe that's our backstop, Megan. You know, your superpower is that you're a realtor. Yes, I can do that. No, I can't do that. And if it's no, I can't do that, then you can take your bag of dicks and go home.
That's right.
Let's change to a new question here, or a new area that we can discuss while we still have a little bit of time left. And then before we wrap up, we'll ask if there are any questions in the chat that have come up. And Christy, I'll ask your help for those in just a moment. So let's talk about the protected classes, because there is some confusion about what's effective where. At the federal level, there are 7 protected classes: race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. Here in the state of Washington, we add 4: marital status, sexual orientation, including gender identity, veteran military status, and source of income. There are some city protected classes in Seattle, for example: age, political ideology, and service animal. are protected classes in the city of Seattle. But most of our members are here in the state of Washington. So we have the 7 and then the 4 that have been added as the source of income became a protected class in 2018. Sam, why don't we start with you on this with the protected classes? So if you feel any awkwardness on any of these with a client or with a buyer or a seller, what's your superpower? What's your backstop? How do you deal with that?
You know, I think partly I cheat, meaning I'm me 100% of the time. And so being the magnet that attracts people that want to work with this kind of crazy, this little human over here, it helps clear the field in some respects, right? So a racist, homophobic person is not likely to interact with me in a meaningful way because I'm very clear in like how we meet our clients, right? So it's often some kind of soft lead. So no one is going to refer someone to me in our industry who is clearly homophobic. So a majority of my clients are gay, lesbian, transgendered, you know, still figuring out how they would like to choose to identify, and amazing straight people. Right. So it's just a pool of humanity that raises their hand and says, I'd like to have a conversation with you. So I think me being myself in all of my social media portals, it's pretty clear that I'm out and proud, that I love diversity, that I'm about inclusion, that I'm not a perfect human being, and I'm willing to wear some of those flaws outwardly. We do embarrassing things from time to time, and it's up to us on whether we choose to grow from those experiences or not. And I think that's the gift, really. So I've had to fire a couple of people through my career, but it tends to be more about some kind of unrealistic expectation and less around a diversity issue or an inclusion issue or an unethical behavior. And I think it's just in part because of how we mirror and match, meaning who is drawn to work with us in the first place. So I'm kind of spoiled in that, I think. Although I'm a man all the time on the phone, you know, and I'm also Pam from time to time, because they'll hear Pam on the voicemail instead of Sam, and then they're all kind of confused for a hot second, but good for them. Good for them.
Megan, what's your experience in Chicago with these protected classes? Do most people know? Do most people not know? And how do you advocate for them?
They know, they just don't give a shit. So
now we got real. We just got real again.
You know, I actually tend to work with more people of color. And so I can't even express how much of an advocate I am for women, but also people of color, because here's the thing, there's a conception that you need to have X amount of money, you need to have this, you need to have that, right? And I don't use the term minority, but in areas and in neighborhoods where there are predominantly people of color, a lot of times people think like you can't get out of that, right? Because it's too hard, it's too this, it's too that. So I try to really push that, and I try to work in those communities and like try to help those folks. Is the price point lower? Yeah, I don't give a shit because I'm helping people, right? And so that's the thing. I had a lender one time tell me, you need to up your price point. Like he didn't want me to send those people to him. And I'm like, huh? Right? Like, yeah, okay, more money, more commission, but that's not why I'm doing this, right? So my point is that, yes, I've seen it many of times, but I don't care, honestly, Tom, right? Like I'm here for a reason, like I'm doing what I love. People ask me all the time, like if you could do anything you wanted to do, what would you be doing? I'm doing it. Is it easy? No, not by any means. It's a lot. I joke that my hours are 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., but it's no joke, right? I'm single mom. Like, it's hard. But the fact is I love what I do, and I'm passionate about what I do. And so that's why I'm here. And so, like Sam was saying, like, there is, let's just say, when I've walked into areas in the city, right? I've walked into houses, normally I don't get a double take, right? In the suburbs, I probably do, right? Me as a person, not my clients, like me, right? So I've experienced even as a realtor that like, you know, because maybe I look too, I don't look more feminine enough, right? But there has been times where I walk in with my clients, people of color, in a large, $650,000, house. The owners are white. And nowadays, more people are home. Sellers are opening for us. They want to be there. Oh, we're going to be home anyway. Quarantine, we're home, right? So they're opening. They see who's coming through their house. And you could just see it in them. They're cringing, What do? I just smile. I just talk, I just smile, I'm happy. Because why should I be angry? Give them the attitude they're giving me? No. And then when I give them a qualified, well put together offer, So to me, it's just about, you got to smile in their face, right? You got to smile in their face, and then you just have to, like, that dumbass old saying, kill them with kindness. It's true though, right? It's true. It's hard. It's hard out here to not just be a realtor, right? It's hard to really fight for what you believe in. But when you do that, there's gratitude at the end, right? There's happiness at the end. You see it in your client's eyes. And when you talk to other realtors and you show them, that's what it is, right? That domino effect doesn't have to be in the negative way. That domino effect could be in a positive way. It could be in the way of, like, you're showing how to advocate for equality. And that's why I do what I do, You can look me up. I'm not the highest producer. I'm not making all these millions, but I don't care. I mean, it would be nice, but that's not why I'm here. So, but my point is that I know it's not easy, and I'm not sitting here saying turn around tomorrow and start, like, preaching or whatever, like I'm doing. My point is that you learn as you go. It's not easy, but you have to be, like, there has to be equality there. There has to be. And if there's not, and there's even a question in the back of your head, then you either need to get out of this business or you need to call me, because I'll talk you straight. Well, I'm not straight, but I'll talk you into the right, direction. So
That just got weird.
yeah, I got real weird. I know. But my point is that you should do what you love, right? You should do what you love, but if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, it's not going to work. All right, I'm off my soapbox. I'm muting myself. Go ahead.
Well, and you, Megan, know the power of home ownership, and you get to put on the cape and fight for that. That's a powerful place. Jerry, you got 40 people sitting at your bar today. Pour us a glass of advice.
Boy, keeping it real is one of the things I think is so important in all of our lives. Be yourself. Like Megan said, hey, I'm not here to song and dance. When you're faced with issues, address them. And if they don't want to deal with it straight and be honest with themselves and be honest with you, then I have no problem in firing at all. Sometimes they'll say something and do something just to test you, right? At 6'3" and 220 pounds now, they're a little hesitant to face off with me, but I will tell them straight up. I said, this is what you get. And if you're not happy, let me find somebody else for you to work with. Let me help you to help me to get out of this situation. You mentioned, as far as, people doing things that will end up getting themselves in trouble. Just this week, I had to address one with the MLS. And it was interesting as far as a protective class, because here in the state of Washington, honorably discharged veterans and military are protected class. And in our market, our inventory is down to about 10 days of inventory, which is really minimal. And so showings are premium. We're getting offers, 15, 20 offers, prices going, I saw one overpay by $500,000 on a house. Well, I had no listings. I wish I had a ton of listings. But the point is that the MLS, the agent had put in there only pre-qualified buyers, which is fine. I mean, everybody doesn't want looky-loos coming through the house, but don't bother showing the house. You can't get a showing appointment unless you are a cash buyer or a 20% conventional loan. That was in the listing. And when I saw that, I right away got in touch with the legal department at the MLS and I said, do you understand this is not right? And number two, it's potentially a fair housing violation, because that then eliminates the VA buyer or the FHA buyer that's using their VA benefits to buy a home. And it took maybe a half hour and they were on it. And that came out of there and the house fortunately sold. But you can't put that in there because it was a fair housing issue. So my best advice is be strong, keep it real, go to your heart. Don't say you're colorblind. When you're working with somebody, try closing your eyes and listen and react accordingly. And don't try and placate people. I don't want people coming to me and giving me some kind of token, relationship. I'm very selective as to who I consider friends and associates, because there's a song that was put out many, many years ago, because I'm back in the old day, Smiling Faces. We've all heard it, right? And sometimes they do tell lies. And the reality is, you just got to be very conscious of not only your surroundings, but be mindful who you work with. And you put the tip jar at the end of the bar and, and I don't take credit cards, Tom.
And that's kind of discrimination. You should take all money. All tips welcome to Jerry.
Nate, I have a favorite poem that says it's the set of the sail and not the gale that determines the destination. So we felt some wind blowing here today. Where is that going to blow us as a profession, as a country, as a person? Where do you feel the wind blowing us as we look now to this new decade in the 21st century?
Well, one of the things that has occurred over the last few years is we have seen, I've seen a lot more conversations and discussion relating to inclusion and equity, diversity, and fair housing than I've seen in the previous decade before that. So I think that that's positive. That's good. That whatever has caused it, it has come to a point where we're having more conversations. And I think that it's important for us to continue to have these conversations. And, look, we've got to get comfortable getting uncomfortable, right? Okay. In order for us to affect positive change, we're going to have to step outside of our comfort zone and talk with people that think differently than us, that look differently than us, that believe differently than us, that love differently than us. All of these different things are extremely important. And it's just human nature for most of us to have a tendency to socialize more with our in-group, with people that are like us, that are more like us. We gravitate towards those folks. If we're in a room of 100 people, we're going to go to the folks that look like us, that think like us, that believe like us, for the most part, unless we're intentional. And that's what I ask you all to do, is to be intentional. So instead of going to that party, and I know we're not going to many parties right now, it just really brings a tear to my eye. I'm telling you, I love festivals. Did I digress? I just love festivals. I love people. I love getting out and about and talking to people. And it's just so hard right now because it's just not safe to do it. But you get the point that I'm making. In general, okay, when we're in these rooms with people, what we want to do is be purposeful and intentional about reaching out to someone that doesn't look like us, that that we know is not like us in other ways, and have a conversation. And we'll be surprised. You'll be surprised at how much we really do all have in common. Okay, and that's, I think, what we really have to get to is a place of understanding and saying, you know what, these folks are just like me. They want to raise their family. They want to, put food on the table. They want to live in a good neighborhood. They want all these different things that everybody wants. They want that American dream, right? When we talk about that American dream, everybody's looking for it. And we are the providers of it. And we have to make sure that we're doing it equitably, right? So that's one of the things we have to make sure that we're doing. Another thing, when we're in those conversations, we need to talk less and listen more. We need to talk less and listen more. Unfortunately, sometimes we have the tendency to share tragedies, right? And compete with someone else with the plight that they have. That's not effective in these conversations. Listen to the person and don't compare your situation to theirs. Understand and empathize with what they have going on. Every situation is unique. The white experience is not monolithic. The African-American experience certainly isn't. Look, my Black experience is my Black experience. It differs from Jerry's. It differs from my wife's. It differs from everyone. And we can't put everybody in the same box and assume that they're the same just because they happen to be a member of this particular group. Okay, we're all different. Everybody's different, but we're all the same at the same time. Another thing that we can do, use your privilege effectively. Okay, and what I mean by that is when we talk about the in-group, if you're a member of the in-group, and this is whatever group that is, okay, whatever in-group that is, and you're having a conversation and someone says something negatively about the out-group, well, whatever that group is, it's your opportunity to use your privilege as being a member of that in-group to set the record straight, to let them know that that's not how it goes. That's not okay. Make it uncomfortable, okay? Because, you don't want to do it because you don't want to make it uncomfortable. That's why we just make these little, these kind of little chuckles and just kind of move on and hope to change the subject. But that doesn't get us to the next space where we need to go. We have to make a point to get uncomfortable there. That's not right. You said this about this particular group, and that's not everyone is the same. Because you had that experience with this one person doesn't mean that the whole group is like that. And in fact, they're not. And then you can work to dispel some of the stereotypes that come into play when some of these conversations occur. And I think that those are some of the things that we can really do to make sure that that we're getting to that next level. Because as we're doing those things, we're going to develop a mindset shift. We're going to get to a place of more understanding that helps everyone. We can educate those that are ignorant to some of the realities. And the reality about the ignorance part of it is that most people can remain sort of comfortably ignorant to some of the challenges that exist in our communities all over the country. Because what happens is, most interests are self-interests. So people are thinking about their own families, their own lifestyle, their own livelihoods, those sorts of things. They're not necessarily thinking that other people experience this differently. And that's what we have to do, is help people understand that, other people experience this life differently than you do. Opportunities that you have are not the same for everyone. Not everyone has the same opportunities that you have. And those are some of the things we've got to work at. And as far as bringing people into that group, into those conversations, we have to be intentional. Because I'll tell you, if we're not intentionally inclusive, we're unintentionally exclusive. And this is as it relates to our associations, our companies, all of that. When you sit around the table and you see everyone that looks like you, that's the problem. That's a problem because someone is not thinking about how to be intentionally inclusive. Now, you might say, or someone might say, or the folks that are quote responsible might say, well, everyone's welcome here. Are they really? Just because you don't have the barriers that say you're excluded doesn't mean that those folks are welcome. You have to be intentional about including people because historically, people have been excluded so much. Just because you take the sign down doesn't mean that people are going to come flowing in. You have to be intentional about that. So so that's really what I have to say about this, and I hope that it's been great to spend some time with the panelists and all of the realtors in WCR here in Spokane, and I certainly got value from the conversation and the discussion, and I hope that you all did too, because at the end of the day, we just have to have more of these types of conversations and discussions because we're always going to get something new. We're going to learn something. We're going to get a level of enlightenment that we didn't have before we joined the conversation. So let's hopefully continue to do that. And I look forward to seeing you all soon.
Nate, thank you. Christy, Jennifer, where are we on time? I think we were aiming for 10:45 to wrap up, or do we have time for questions?
We are trying to get wrapped up, but we had a couple things I just wanted to bring up from the chat.
Yes,
and
please.
One of them was that we had a brand new realtor who just said that she is nervous about these conversations, but that having the information at hand to help her will give her strength. So welcome, Gina, and thank you for sharing. And then, I felt like there was a question that I know it might take us over just a minute, but somebody asked about Black Lives Matter and how does that relate to our industry? And I think it's such an important question. I think we ought to try to spend a few minutes on it. I don't know if you did, Jerry or Nate or
I saw that and I was trying to go back to that. Yes. And the question was, I'm scrolling. Sorry. I want to make sure I answer it or at least address it correctly.
I got it as my 2020 tattoo to honor the experiences of 2020. I got a Black Lives Matter tattoo.
All right, let's see.
And while Megan is looking for the original question, Sam, so why? Why the tattoo?
I think for me, I'm a collector of tattoos and experiences. So not that long ago, I got a traditional wire hanger tattoo for another very obvious reason, right? Women's rights and who has the rights to our bodies. Black Lives Matters to me, I'm a huge proponent of, and my LinkedIn cover photo is Black Lives Matter, because I want to be very clear that I think there's an issue that needs to be addressed. And my own family is not supportive. They're like, all lives matter. And so, there's a divide already when they want to take the conversation there. So I'm really against that being the conversation because we're not ready to have all lives matter conversation. That it should always be the case. But it's clearly not the case because our peoples, these are our humans, our human friends, peers, loved ones, have not had the same rights and experiences that many of us have had. And I think that is crap. And we need to keep talking about that just as much as we need to keep talking about this. It is very much also fair housing, but there's just a lot of mistreatment that is clearly rampant and clearly rearing its ugly head again, that I think we need to keep in front of our faces in meaningful, powerful, painful ways, because people just don't realize what our brothers and sisters have gone through, are going through, that their kids will still go through when I'm 70. Kids and grandchildren are still going to potentially be going through some of this nonsense that has been happening in our country for so long. So I welcome all of those conversations because I think that they're critical to us understanding. My privileged experience, even in my dysfunctional upbringing, is nothing in a way in comparison to some of the abuse and profiling, which was mentioned earlier, and just disrespect of human beings and humanity of a specific class that just breaks my heart every day.
Megan, can we go back to you? I see that Christy reposted the original question for us at the end of the chat.
Well, okay. Well, I scrolled all the way to the top, but I found it anyways.
Thank you.
So the question is, I'd like to hear the panelists' opinion of Black Lives Matter. I'm afraid too many have misinterpreted the intention and who is behind, and it would be awesome to shed some light. So my interpretation, I'm all about Black Lives Matter, right? Because here's the thing, we wouldn't need to have this campaign if in the past, like Sam said, their lives mattered, right? But they didn't at one time. And that's the thing, it's one of those things like, and I don't know what the real root behind this question is. So if Diza, if you want to jump in, obviously unmute yourself and like jump in. But I'm a very big advocate for BLM. Always have been, even before George Floyd, right? Even before this, like in June of last year. So I guess my question is, I need a little bit, yeah, thank you, Diza. What is your question really?
The intention behind the question is really to have people understand that that Black Lives Matter is not excluding anyone who is not Black. It is saying Black lives have not been treated equally, still are not treated equally. And so as a realtor, and with this whole code of ethics, we have to be realtors in our personal lives. And I have had a concern about supporting Black Lives Matter because of the opinion of others who feel that it is not how I see it, not how you're seeing it, not how you're sharing about the importance of that. We as privileged people stand up and say this is not okay, and that we are, my support of a Black Lives Matter movement should not be seen as some political movement or support of anything other than what I'm out to cause in this world. And so the reason for the question is because I wanted to hopefully enlighten others on the call perhaps about what it is and why it exists, and that all lives matter is taking away from the fact that the history is what it is and the experiences are what they are. And it's something I've been so passionate about that I think that people have an opinion one way or the other about what it is. And so I just want to hear from you guys and your experiences and how it's impacting you. And I know we're short on time. And I see Jennifer like, we got prizes to give away over there. But
so I'm gonna give my 30-second real quick spiel. Here's the thing. Like I said, I support Black Lives Matter. I know as realtors, a lot of people are nervous about picking a side, right? They call it picking a side. There's no fucking side to being a human. Sorry, Jennifer. I respect you so much. I'm sorry I swore. But there's no side to that. You know what I'm saying? Like, so in my mind, this is not a political matter, right? It's a human matter. And so that's all I got. That's my 20 seconds. Anyways, I'm done. We're running out of time.
Perfect. It's not Black Lives Matter. It's a human matter, but that, yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
The argument that I always make towards that when I hear it, I always state, of course, I say my life matters and I'll do whatever I can to help your life matter more. But my argument when I talk to some people about it is that the reason why it's become so relevant now is because of, how quickly things happen. And, people see it instantaneously as it happens. And so I ask them, when they say, well, all lives matter, I say, well, do you think then that if I were white and was handing out $20 phony bills, whether I knew it or not, would I be shot and killed? Would I be choked to death for selling, unpackaged cigarettes in New York, right? Would I have been shot in my own home based on some of the things? And it's become such relevant information because it's right there in front of us. And so when it's Black Lives Matter, I would say that I challenge you that if any of those people were white or non-Black or person of color, would they have suffered the same consequences? If I was running through the neighborhood jogging and be shot like a dog. That's scary stuff. And it's real. And it's ongoing. So yeah, Black Lives Matter. I will hear you say loud and clear, all lives matter. And you're right, your lives matter. But if you say that in response to the Black Lives Matter movement, then you're missing the point. Because I'll throw this at you real quick because it's just recent. When the Million Man March, when the Black Million Man March hit DC, and they went to, if they had gone to the Capitol building the way it just happened just recently, how many people would have died? Right? First of all, how many military, how many police would be on those steps guarding the Capitol? And then how many would have died?
They would have killed everyone. Nobody would have made it in.
Or be in jail today. That's why my life matters. Because when I saw that happening, and I've been in those halls, and I know the relevance of being in Washington, D.C. And when I saw that happen, I was devastated. Sorry, I'm off.
Wow. 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 Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Jerry. And thank you, Tom. Such great conversations. And I hope everyone had a moment to be uncomfortable a time or two, right? I looked forward to this event probably more than any other because I knew I was going to grow. And to be honest with you, I called and I invited people, and it was hard because some of the feedback that I got was, I live where I live for a reason. And I don't say that to discourage anybody, but I say that because you can't give up on people. And we have to keep having these hard conversations because we can make a difference. So I really don't have any words. People that know me, I always have words, but really I don't have words, but I have a feeling. And I hope that we all can take on, the courage that Sam spoke about and the responsibility that Nate talked about and the advocacy of Megan and Jerry, just your passion. So that is my wish for everybody. And I just want to thank you all for being here. We do have prizes, so let's do the prizes really quick. And I'm going to share my screen. I also want to say thank you so much to all our strategic partners who made this possible for us. And we're going to spin the wheel.
I do not see enough Jennifers on that wheel. I just want to point it out. I've got some concerns about the legitimacy of this wheel.
Yes. And so Chris Scott, you have won a Marabou's overnight stay from our Gold Strategic Partner. So thank you so much. I appreciate you all for being here. Our next event will be in March and it will be membership bingo. So please join us and reach out to any of us. Let's keep this conversation going. Kate Kelly, I know I saw you. Kate is our sister in Denver, Colorado. Do you mind letting us know? Because we do have a conversation we can have tomorrow.
Paste it again in the chat, Kate, if you would, because you did it earlier, but do it again so it's right and fresh.
Absolutely. So there has been a small coalition of us who connected over a Facebook post. The National Association of Realtors in November, when they adopted the recommendations from the Professional Standards Committee to change the verbiage and add verbiage to the Code of Ethics. I think Christy and myself connected, and then a couple others were honestly just advocating via the comments. We're like, I've never been more proud to be a realtor. This is a huge win for us. And we have created a small group of us that is Real Estate Professionals Against Racism. And tomorrow we have a Zoom call with Richard Rothstein, who is actually the author of The Color of Law. So if anybody wants to join, we'll drop that in the chat. It's at
I dropped it for you.
Oh, sweet.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect.
It's at 11 a.m. Pacific time. The more, the merrier. It's going to be a really good conversation. Again, like-minded, passionate individuals who are demanding change.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kate. And we do have one more prize. It's a bonus prize. It's a 1-year subscription to Black Lens magazine. So let's see who the lucky winner is. It's Georgina. Is it Georgina? No, it's Kathy. It's Kathy Wall. Sorry, Georgina. So congratulations. We'll get with you guys after this and get you all set up. But thank you all for coming. Please join Kate and Christy tomorrow, and let's just keep the conversation going. So thank you all for being here, and have a wonderful, wonderful week.
Best morning in a long time. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
The panelists, you're amazing.
Good job, Jennifer Shoup. Thanks for the invite.
I miss you guys. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Fingers crossed for San Diego.
Yes, for sure.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
And thanks for coming to
Thank
Spokane.
you.